The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. Yeah!
Hi, and welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to pick the best pool filter, or what I think would be the best pool filter for you to purchase and upgrade to. And I'm going to go over some of the factors that you have to consider when you're looking for the best pool filter. Pool Service Pro. Open a Leslie's wholesale account today and receive wholesale pricing on products you use every day. Leslie's Pool Supply offers convenient locations that are open 7 days a week. Another great benefit of opening a Leslie's wholesale account is Leslie's referral program. Get referred to a customer looking for weekly pool service. Save time and money and grow your pool service route and become a Leslie's Pro. So picking the best pool filter is kind of like asking someone to pick the best vehicle out there. Doesn't matter if it's a car, truck, SUV, or electric vehicle. They want you to pick the best vehicle across all the categories. And that's the same difficulty you're going to have when you want to pick the best pool filter, because there are technically 3 types of filters. Maybe if you wanted to split the Quad D into another type, you have 4 types of filter. But technically there are 3 types of filters. You have a sand filter, you have a diatomaceous earth filter or DE filter, and then you have the cartridge filter. All of these have their pros and cons. All of these are different from each other, vastly different in a lot of respects. So picking the best filter across all the categories and without really focusing in on the filter type itself is actually extremely difficult and something that you probably can't do accurately. Let me go over just a few of the factors when you're picking the best filter. And I always look for situational cases where the best filter is for your situation. I'll start with sand filters. Their filtration, as far as micron goes, is the worst of the 3 types of filters. You're not going to get the finest filtration with a sand filter. I've heard it anywhere from 30 to 40 microns is as fine as you're going to get. A micron basically is just the measurement of particles, and the finer the micron, the better the filtration. If you use a Brita water filter, that filters down to about 0.5 microns, which is less than 1 micron. That's probably the purest water filter you can get for your house. You won't really need that in most cases. Most water filters will filter 20 microns or less, which is good enough to filter out a lot of the particles and getting the odor-free water, I guess you would say. But the finer the micron, of course, the better. And the same applies to pool filtration. So the sand filter will filter down to 30 or 40 microns, which isn't the best, but the sand filter does have features that make it very desirable for a lot of people. Number 1 is that the sand filter doesn't need to be broken down and cleaned every 6 months, 4 to 6 months, or every month. You don't have to take the top off and take out the elements, which there are none in there, by the way. There's actually sand in there, or an alternate media to sand. So the sand filter does have the convenience factor of all you need to really do is backwash the sand filter whenever the filter pressure or PSI goes up 10 from the clean point. So if the sand filter is at 20 PSI when you install it, and then you run it for 3 weeks and the pressure goes up to 30 PSI, you would just simply backwash that filter for 2 minutes or so, and then the pressure will drop back down, because basically the sand is the filter, is the element that filters the water, and the dirt gets evacuated in a backwashing of that filter that's on top of the sand bed. It's really an easy system and simple, although it's not as efficient or doesn't filter down to a small micron. And you may run into water quality issues with a sand filter if the pool starts to get cloudy or get green on you. It'll take a little bit longer to get that back in balance. But the advantage of the sand filter is easy maintenance, and then you just change the sand every several years or few years whenever you need to change that sand. The tanks are made really well. The multi-port valve is highly functional because you can vacuum the pool to waste if you need to. So the smaller micron is kind of compensated for by the fact that you can actually put it in waste mode and vacuum out the pool, and you don't have to worry about filtering down the particles that it can't filter down because you're vacuuming that to waste. Of course, the water usage is a negative. You're wasting water, so to speak, by backwashing it or vacuuming the waste with a sand filter. So those are things to consider also depending on what area or region of the country you're in. And so sand filters do a really good job in areas where you have a lot of dirt, and they're really easy to maintain. And so that's why they're pretty popular in areas like Arizona, the high desert, and parts of the world like South Africa and other areas where the sand filter has really taken hold. And you may say, well, why aren't you picking a sand filter as your best filter? My region of Southern California, we don't see too many sand filters. And if you do see them, they're pretty rare. They're not the preferred method of filtration in our areas, mainly because of the type of dirt we get here. And the D.E filter had been populated in my area in particular. So D.E was a really popular choice for a lot of builders, installers, mainly because of the fact that it filters down to the best micron rating, anywhere from 2 to 5 microns, or 2 to 3 microns I've heard even. So the micron rating of a D.E filter is extremely good. It's the best filtration level of any of the filter types, better than sand, better than cartridge. So if you want the most crystal clear and best looking water, the D.E filter will fit that bill. It filters down again to the smallest micron, which makes it the most effective filter on the market. Now there are some drawbacks with the D.E filter, and I think the biggest drawback is actually the D.E itself, the diatomaceous earth itself. For me, it's messy, it's time consuming. When you clean a D.E filter, it gets all over the place. You may think you cleaned it up, but 2 weeks later you see dust everywhere. It's really annoying, and that's an annoying aspect of it. It also is an industrial carcinogen, which means that if you work in the pool industry and you use a lot of D.E every 6 months or 4 months when you clean your filters, and you're breathing in that dust, you can actually get a form of lung disease and cancer. And so you can see it on the label. When you look at the label, it says it's industrial carcinogen. I think in Europe it's a straight carcinogen. They have stricter rules. Basically, you want to wear a mask when you're using D.E. My actual favorite D.E product is by EP Minerals. It's called Celapool, and this is the low dust D.E. Again, you can find it by looking up Celapool online. That's CELA pool, and this is a low dust diatomaceous earth. A lot of suppliers carry this product. It's a little more expensive than standard D.E, but doesn't have all the dust that you see with the diatomaceous earth. I see pool pros all the time, and this is something that I shake my head at. They're on the back of their truck, and they're pouring bags of regular D.E into like a big barrel, and dust is going all over the place. I think that's just really hazardous. You can also use Perlite. EP Minerals also makes the Perlite. It's like a D.E alternative. It's very similar to D.E, but doesn't have the toxic side effects of diatomaceous earth. It's an alternative. It's really powdery, so it's like the opposite of the Celapool, but the Perlite is not considered an industrial hazard. So that's the biggest drawback with diatomaceous earth filters, D.E filters, is actually adding the element and cleaning the D.E filters. So if you have a top manifold type D.E filter, they're a pain to clean. I mean, they're a pain to get back together, and leaking D.E back into the pool is a big problem with D.E filters. There is an advantage of the D.E filter over the cartridge filter, and that is it has a lot of the same attributes of a sand filter, where you can backwash a D.E filter and go between cleanings with a backwash of that filter. You would just add some more diatomaceous earth to that filter after the backwash, and it's one of those things where it can stretch out the cleaning of a D.E filter, whereas a cartridge filter, there's no way to backwash it. You have to take the top off and clean it. If I were to pick the best D.E filter, I have two choices in the D.E category, and this wouldn't be the best filter, I don't think, for most people, because a lot of people don't like D.E. But if you do have a D.E filter and you want to replace your pool filter with a D.E filter, the two top choices for me are the Pentair Quad D.E filter, and this is a cartridge type D.E filter. There's 4 cartridges in there. They look like a cartridge filter basically, but they look like they have the grid material on the cartridges versus just the paper. And the Quad D.E filters, to me, are superior over the standard D.E filters for a number of reasons. One, they're extremely easy to clean. You just take the lid off, pull out the 4 cartridges and hose them off. So you clean them like a cartridge filter, and they're easy to reassemble. You can also get a larger square footage of cleaning out of a Quad D.E filter. So you can get a 60 square foot, an 80 square foot, or 100 square foot Quad D filter, which in some cases would double the size of your filter. If you have a 48 square foot DE filter now, and you install a 100 square foot Quad DE, that doubles the size of your filtration area. So I like that aspect of it. You can get a backwash valve. It has to be specific for the Quad DE filter to be effective. I don't bother with that. I just take them apart and clean them whenever I need to. They seem to last a lot longer as far as the cleaning, in between cleaning, than the grid type filters. There are a few things you need to know about the Quad D filter before you go and install one. Number one, the inlet and outlet are reversed. Not technically reversed from a D filter, but the inlet and outlet are opposite of a standard D filter, and they match what you would see on a cartridge filter. So be aware that if you're cutting out a, let's say, a Pentair FNS Plus filter, you can't use that existing backwash valve, and you also have to plumb the inlet and outlet differently. They're at different locations on the filter than a standard D filter. So it's not a drop-in replacement because of the inlet and outlet. Now, if you have a cartridge filter and you're going with the Quad D, it's a direct replacement in that case because the inlet and outlet are in the same location. But just be aware of that. I've seen many Quad D filters installed technically backwards because they just took the old D filter out and installed a new one. Pentair has done a good job of marking the inlet and outlet so that you know that they're reversed on the Quad D filter than the standard D filter. But this mistake still happens out there, and I see it once in a while. Still, they'll install it technically backwards because of that. Other than that, the Quad D filter would be my first choice when replacing your D filter. And I'll just add to that before moving on to my other D filter recommendation. The cartridges seem to last a lot longer than the grids on the Quad D filter. They have bands on them similar to a cartridge filter, and once those start to break and the pleats kind of separate, then you have to replace them. But as far as having holes in them or anything like that, I haven't had that kind of issue. So they seem to last longer than the grid type filters. Now, if you're going to go with a grid type D filter, I really think that the Pentair 4000 series filter is underrated, and it's something that I like because it's the opposite of a top manifold D filter. The top manifold is actually on the bottom of the 4000 series filter, and then to clean those, you just take off the small, what would be the bottom manifold, and take the grids out one by one, and then you can easily snap them back in to the top manifold that's on the bottom of the filter, and it just makes cleaning this filter extremely easy. The only drawback with the 4000 series filter is that the top of the tank is pretty heavy because it separates in the middle, and then you have to take the tank out. There's no handles on there, and it could be heavy for some people. The other problem with the 4000 series, not really a problem, it's just the location of the backwash valve. It's the handle on the bottom of the filter, and you have to make sure that it's installed so you can properly reach it and push it and move it. Once in a while, the backwash rotor valve will fail over time, and you may dribble out some water. The way I fix that is I just put a ball valve on the end of the backwash pipe and leave it in the off position. To change out that rotor valve on the bottom is really time consuming, and you have to cut the filter out. So I just put that as a stopgap, but they will last for years without really failing or having any issues, especially if you don't backwash it as often. The more you backwash, of course, the more that rotor valve will start to fail. But I like the 4000 series filter, even with the fault of the backwash valve being on the bottom of the filter. Sometimes that gets really stiff. You have to get down on your hands and knees and make sure the customer's not watching, but get down on your knees and kind of use your back of your foot to push that valve closed. And you have to use a lot of strength sometimes to pull it, to push it open, and then to pull it closed, you have to use a lot of strength sometimes to push it closed. So that's some drawback with that. But the overall engineering or design of the filter, I think it's great. You have what would be the top manifold on the bottom. You have the grids in a circular position, and you can pull them out one by one and clean them. There's no partial grid. There's no engineering degree necessary to put this thing back together. And to me, it's highly underrated as far as a D filter. The Pentair 4000 series is very similar to the Pentair 2000 stainless steel tank series, except you can get the lid back on without hardly any issue. Whereas the stainless steel 2000 series, you have sometimes a hard time getting that little lid back on. So to me, those two would be my choices for a D filter. And of course, I'm more partial to a cartridge filter over a D filter for a number of reasons. I think cleaning a cartridge filter is simple and easy. I like the 4 cartridge type filters or the quad cartridge type filters. I don't really like the single bullet cartridge filters because they usually don't have the square footage capacity necessary to go 6 months in between cleaning. And the 4 cartridge filters in my area generally can go 4 to 6 months in between cleaning those filters. So a cartridge filter will filter down to 10 to 20 microns. I think you're leaning more towards the 20 micron as far as filtration. Now, can you tell a difference between a pool that has a sand filter, a cartridge filter, or a D filter? I really truthfully can't tell the difference in water quality. If I walk back to a pool and look at the water, if it's summer and it's sparkling blue, I couldn't tell you offhand if it's a D filter, a cartridge filter, or a sand filter. And I think most pool pros couldn't tell you if they go back to a pool if it has a D filter or a cartridge filter. You really can't tell the difference between 3 micron filtration and 15 or 20 micron filtration of a cartridge filter. It's not something that you can visually see in the pool. I think the cartridge filter, the 4 cartridge filter, has some distinct advantages over D filters and sand filters for that fact. And that's the square footage of that filter itself. The cartridge filter, if you get a good sized cartridge filter, let's say you get a 400 square foot cartridge filter or 450, then you have 450 square feet of filtration area. And if you have a 60 square foot D filter, the filtration of a cartridge filter is 4 or 5 times greater than a D filter. I mean, if you had a 48 square foot D filter and you put in a 520 square foot cartridge filter, that's 10 times the filtration area of that filter. And if you don't think you're going to notice the difference in filtration square footage, you'll notice right away. I had a service account that had a 36 square foot D filter, tiny little filter, and the pool was like 20,000 gallons. It was really ridiculous. The builder put that in there. It was in there for a long time because it was a 2000 series filter. I put in a 420 square foot cartridge filter, and that pool's flow was so powerful that I had to divert some of the spa return in order to keep the water from basically, shooting out of the pool. It was flowing so well in the return lines in the pool. And this is the difference you're going to notice. Even in my house, I had a 320 square foot cartridge filter, and I put in a 450 square foot cartridge filter. And on low speed, I noticed my spa spillway is really moving a lot better than with the smaller cartridge filter, which wasn't tiny to begin with, but it was smaller than the one I put in. So the cartridge filter will give you a lot more square footage than a D filter. It's also much easier to clean. There's no element in there. You just hose off the cartridge filter. You clean it on the grass or on the cement, and you're just hosing off dirt basically. So cleaning a cartridge filter is the advantage. Disadvantage of the cartridge filter, of course, is that you can't backwash it, which means that you have to take it apart and clean it. If you have a single cartridge filter, you may be cleaning it more often because you can't backwash that. And I think that that's a drawback for a lot of areas that have a lot of dirt. So in Arizona, the high desert of California, if you have a lot of dirt that gets in the pool, the cartridge filter may be a hindrance rather than something that you want to put in because you can't backwash it. So a sand filter or a D filter would be better in those areas. But in most other regions of the country, the cartridge filter would be my choice because of the extra square footage and for the ease of cleaning of that cartridge filter. So who makes the best cartridge filter? Or I would say the 4 cartridge type filter, because I'm going to focus on that, and I'm not going to talk too much about the single cartridge filters, except for the AquaStar filter, which is a single cartridge filter, but it kind of fits in the category of the 4 quad type cartridge filter. I would say that the Pentair Clean & Clear Plus would be the clear winner for the cartridge filter category, except for one fatal flaw of that filter, and something Pentair has failed to address, even though every pool tech complains to the rep about it, complains to the manufacturer about it, comments on Facebook about this issue, and that is the terrible location of the drain plug. Right underneath the inlet and outlet of the filter, you have to have a special tool to remove it. If you make the mistake of breaking off that drain plug, you have to take everything out and you have to unscrew it from the inside. It's a big mess, and it's one of those things that makes this filter that would have been the best filter because it's really made really well, but the drain plug is in a really bad location. Why they haven't changed it in the last 15 years, nobody knows. But if they move that drain plug, the Clean and Clear Plus would definitely be the best cartridge filter. Until they move that drain plug, I can't really recommend it to a lot of people for that reason. I would say that the Hayward and Jandy filters are pretty comparable to the Pentair filter, and the drain plug is easily accessible on the back or side of the filter, which is something that's a no-brainer when you're building a filter. Make the drain plug somewhere where you can access it. And I know that's my rant on the Pentair Clean and Clear Plus. I love the filter. I had one at my pool, and it didn't give me any issues at all, except that drain plug is in a bad location. And I think that's what makes it not the number one filter, just for that one reason. There's been a lot of talk about the AquaStar Pipeline filter. I like it. I have one installed and I'm testing it. I really like the fact that it's one gigantic cartridge filter. So it's almost like having a 300 square foot cartridge filter. It's rated, for the flow. It's rated at having the flow of a 500 square foot cartridge filter, but it's only a single cartridge, and the pleats are really deep in there, and I think that's one of the reasons why it has so much flow. I think it's definitely one of the most innovative design cartridge filters. It's something new that's on the market. It has a really great built-in safety feature where you can't remove the top locking ring and get the lid off if the filter is pressurized. But it's new. It's only about a year old, so time will tell if defects will appear in this filter. The tank feels really solid. It feels like a Stay Right System 3 type filter. And to me, I like the compact size, and the flow you're going to get out of this filter is, again, the same as a 500 square foot plus filter. So those are the winning points of the AquaStar filter. Availability is kind of tough. I think you can find it at your supplier, and you can find it at some pool stores. But for just a regular person looking for that filter, you may have a hard time locating it if you don't have a pool professional who can install it for you. And I think it's a great filter, and it's a really well-designed cartridge filter. You can see where I'm going with the best cartridge filter, because I don't really have a cartridge filter that I can say is the best. I like a lot of different cartridge filters. I think they're pretty standard. I mean, there's nothing that separates one cartridge filter from the other, basically. The Jandy cartridge filter has nice handles on top, which I like. I just don't like the top manifold on that filter. The Hayward filter, I think, is good and solid. Can't really argue against the Hayward cartridge filter. It's just basically a filter. It's like kind of like the sand filter category, where you can't really screw up a sand filter. You really can't screw up a cartridge filter too badly. The only exception would be the Waterway cartridge filters. They had a run of those where they had the handles on the side of the lid, and those would snap and crack, and they had a drain plug that would leak, but they fixed that problem, and the Waterway cartridge filters don't have the handles on the side anymore. They have the handles on the top. I think a cartridge filter with handles is really important. It makes getting the lid on and off easy. So Waterway has the handles on top of the filter. Not as robust as the Jandy cartridge filter with the handles on top, but similar to that. And if you're looking to get a filter with really good margin for your business, the Leslie's Jacuzzi, the JCF 425, I have this installed in my house, by the way. So the JCF 425 is made by Waterway. They fixed the leaking drain plug, and they fixed the handles that would crack the top tank. And so this filter definitely is really well made. It has Pleatco cartridges included, and if you have a wholesale account at Leslie's, you're going to get a really good price on the Jacuzzi JCF 425. It retails for $1,300, and you can sell it to your client for something similar to that. And I think the cartridge filters have a lot of variety and choices. Besides the single cartridge filters, you have the Stay Right System 3s. I wouldn't recommend putting one of those in a pool that has an existing equipment pad, because you need a big area to install the System 3 filter. If you have any of these on your route, you'll notice that the builder or installer puts them right up against the wall or fence, and getting one of those clamps off is always kind of impossible, and one of those things where you're yelling and belly aching at the builder or installer. Why did you put it so close to the wall? And cursing their existence. And so the System 3 filters are actually great. I like them, but I don't think I would install one. They're expensive. The cartridges are extremely expensive, but if you have one on your route, I know you're going to like the System 3 filters because they're fairly easy to clean. You have that gigantic cartridge that sometimes is hard to get out, and you have those 8 clamps that go around it that are a pain, but if you have the multi-torque tool, it's really easy to get those off, and you're going to like the durability of the System 3 filter. But if I were to pick a filter to install at a customer's house now, a cartridge filter, I would say the Jacuzzi JCF 425 made by Waterway. It's a 425 square foot cartridge filter. So far I've had it on my pool, giving me zero issues. It's easy to clean. I like the clamp. It's one of those things where it's a no-brainer because you get a good margin on that at Leslie's Wholesale. And the AquaStar Pipeline filter would be one that I would definitely be installing. I think it's a great price point. It's a great compact filter. And again, it's kind of new, so I can't say it's the best filter. And you can put in a Hayward or Jandy or at the worst a Pentair Clean & Clear Plus filter. And you're going to have a very reliable cartridge filter. There's really nothing that distinguishes one from the other, although Pentair did buy Pleatco, so I'm assuming they're going to start putting Pleatco cartridges in their new filters. But other than that, there's not a big distinguishing trait between one filter or the other. It's not like the Quad D.E filter where it's revolutionary for that filter type. And I think any of those cartridge filters will do well for you when you're putting them in your client's pool. If you're looking for other podcasts I recorded, you can find those on my website at swimmingpoollearning.com. On the banner, click on the icon there, and that'll take you to a drop-down menu of other podcasts that I've recorded. I also have a coaching program, and you can learn more about that at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. Pool Service Pro. Open a Leslie's Wholesale account today and receive wholesale pricing on products you use every day. Leslie's Pool Supply offers convenient locations that are open 7 days a week. Another great benefit of opening a Leslie's Wholesale account is Leslie's referral program. Get referred to a customer looking for weekly pool service. Save time and money and grow your pool service route and become a Leslie's Pro.